You raised your bow with the string section, but the sound that came back was wrong. Not quiet, distant, like shouting into a well and hearing your own voice arrive late and strange. The conductor's arms sliced the air, the brass player's cheeks ballooned with effort, yet what reached your ears came back thin and delayed, a ghost chasing the living notes. Maybe your ears were still adjusting, you thought. You leaned harder into your strings, forcing the ensemble to lock. It only worsened. The louder you played, the more the echo smeared everything into mud. Then you looked up. The ceiling curved like the inside of a giant seashell, beautiful and white and utterly treacherous. That curve was catching your sound, bending it, firing it back at the stage like a mirror focusing light. The very shape that made this building famous was swallowing the music whole. The audience sat waiting for brilliance. They were about to hear a disaster, and there was nothing anyone on stage could do to stop it. But that curve was never meant to be a trap. It began as a triumph. In 1957, a young Danish architect named Jørgen Utzon sketched soaring white shells that looked like sails catching the wind, and the judges gasped. 232 other designs had been submitted. Utzon's was chosen because it made you feel something before you understood it. The shells were later tamed into geometry anyone could build. Every one of them, curved and different as they looked, was secretly a slice from the same perfect sphere, 75 meters across. A brilliant trick, a single shape, infinitely varied. The world saw beauty, but a few specialists saw danger. Sound, like light, bounces off curves. A concave ceiling doesn't scatter music, it gathers it, focuses it, throws it like a spotlight onto one unlucky spot. Some warned these shells would behave like the inside of a satellite dish, catching notes and hurling them where they didn't belong. The warnings were filed away. The shells were locked in, concrete and irreversible. The outside was decided, the inside would have to follow. Peter Hall inherited a cage. The shells stood half-finished on the harbor, beautiful, empty, and immovable. Their curves were set in concrete. No architect chooses to build a concert hall inside a shape designed without one, but Hall had no choice. His team mapped the interior and found exactly what physics predicted. A concave ceiling loomed above the stage like a waiting lens. Parallel side walls stretched back like a tunnel. Geometries acousticians dread. Sound would bounce, gather, focus. Musicians would hear ghosts of themselves. Audiences in the rear would strain for notes that never reached them. But the budget was bleeding. The political clock was ticking. No money to re-engineer the shells, no time to start over. So they built it anyway. The curved ceiling went up. The parallel walls went in. Every beam locked the geometry tighter, sealed the acoustic fate. The hall looked magnificent. It was ready. And somewhere in the silence before the first note, the building held its breath. The world was about to find out what happens when beauty ignores the physics of sound. Take your seat, the orchestra's tuning. The ninth is about to begin. Something's wrong the instant the cellist draws her bow. She hears each note twice, once from the string beneath her hand, once from the ceiling, a split second late. The sound shoots up, slaps off that curved shell, and drops back on her like a hand from behind. She looks to the first violin, his lips count the beat, but she can't find him in it. The brass fires a chord and it lands as mud, not music. Later, the players'll say it felt like performing in separate rooms. Out in the hall, the damage splits the crowd in two. Some seats get pounded with brittle, focused sound. Others sit in dead pockets where the geometry swallows the music whole. The rear rows catch only a thin, distant wash. The performance ends, applause rises. But backstage, the players know the most photographed building on Earth has failed its first test, and the shells that made it famous are the very things that made it broken. The engineers needed a fix, but first they had to understand what they were fighting. That soaring ceiling, the one that looked like a sail catching wind, was shaped like a bowl, and a bowl doesn't scatter sound, it catches it. Every note the orchestra played shot upward and bounced off that curved surface the way light bounces off a shaving mirror. The waves didn't spread, they gathered, they focused, right onto the stage. Musicians weren't just hearing themselves too loud, they were standing inside a sonic hotspot, blasted by their own reflections while the sound never reached the back of the hall. Meanwhile, the long parallel walls talked to each other. A clarinet's note would ping back and forth in a fluttering echo, smearing every attack into mud. The room's shape stretched the reverberation to a long, muddy decay. In a concert hall, that's not warmth, that's fog. Beethoven's phrases need air between them. Here, each chord bled into the next, drowning the architecture of the music itself. The shells were doing exactly what physics demanded of them. Geometry had become the enemy, and you cannot negotiate with a law of wave reflection. In the early 1980s, engineers faced a cage built of fame and stone. The shells couldn't be touched. The walls couldn't move. So they reached for the only variable left, the air itself. Teams rigged enormous transparent rings above the stage, acrylic discs wide as swimming pools, hung like floating lily pads in the void. They called them acoustic clouds. When a sound wave struck one, its focused beam shattered into a scattered shower. The hot spot cooled. The dead zone stirred. Musicians on stage breathed easier, hearing balance where chaos had reigned. Audience members in the rear caught phrases that once vanished before reaching them. It was clever. It was elegant. It was not enough. The shells still curved. The walls still ran parallel. The clouds softened the damage, but couldn't undo the geometry that caused it. A violin section still fought flutter echo. A conductor still strained to hold ensemble through the fog. The opera house had been bandaged, not healed, and every musician who stepped inside felt the reminder: the wound was still there, the architecture still waiting. By 2020, the clouds had done all they could. The hall was better, still far from world class. So the opera house made a choice no one had dared. It closed the doors entirely. For more than 2 years, the concert hall sat silent while crews rebuilt it from within. They lowered the stage and raked it forward, tilting the musicians toward the audience instead of toward the ceiling's trap. Above them, new timber reflectors caught sound and threw it back where it belonged. Automated drapes tamed the reverberation for different performances. A redesigned ceiling finally broke the old sphere's curve. The cost ran to 150 million Australian dollars. Every lesson learned since that opening night in 1973 was poured into the wood and the calculated angles. This was surgery on the building's bones. In July 2022, the hall reopened. The shells outside still soared, unchanged. But inside, everything had shifted. The musicians took their places. The audience hushed, and the question that had haunted this room for half a century hung in the air, waiting for the first note to answer it. That first note came, and it spread, not up into a trap, not into a hot spot on the stage, but outward in every direction, caught by timber and scattered by angles that finally understood what the music needed. Musicians heard each other across the orchestra for the first time in 50 years. A woman in the back row heard the bow touch the string. The hall that had swallowed sound now gave it back, warm and whole. The shells outside still caught the sun, but now the inside matched them. The geometry that once weaponized every note had been broken, reshaped, taught to share. The physics had never changed. Concave surfaces still focus waves. Dead zones still wait for the wrong geometry. What changed was that the building finally surrendered to the law instead of fighting it. It did not overcome its own shape by force of beauty. It overcame it by listening to what sound actually does. And now, when the last note fades into a hall that finally returns every whisper, the sun that Louis Kahn said first discovered its beauty on the building's shells warms a space that sings as brilliantly as it looks. If you want to keep hearing what buildings are really trying to tell us, there's a button for that.